we want social change at a huge level, but why we want it is because we want to move away from overconsumption. Now that can be in whatever form you can think of. So maybe it's stopping buying clothes from Primark and buying more secondhand or vintage. Maybe it's just the amount that you travel or literally consume carbon. We want to move people to a more carbon zero or carbon negative economy, and we're doing that through this kind of positive storytelling, but also making it stylish and desirable. People aren't going to stop shopping. They're not going to stop traveling, or I know we've stopped traveling so much at the moment, but people still have that thirst. So we see it as better to kind of divert people into apps and businesses and brands and products that actually give back to the planet or help the planet, rather than just mindlessly consume stuff that doesn't help us.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess.
Thanks for tuning in. This is Dan. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. This is episode 38. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Georgina Wilson-Powell, who is founder and editor-in-chief of Pebble magazine. Now, Pebble you will find at pebblemag.com. They're an online magazine, a increasingly growing community around the world of folks that are super engaged and interested in how we live more sustainably on this planet, but how we live in a much better, more interesting, creative and cooler way too. Now, you can't argue with that. Less impact, more fun. That's kind of what they're about. And they are exploring all kinds of extraordinary issues and finding ways of connecting people to new ideas, new businesses, new networks that are sort of leaning into the problems we face and how we live more consciously, and how we can do that with fun and lighter footprint. So all brilliant. We'll get to that very shortly. Now, this conversation was recorded in early July. I think this was on the verge, potentially the eve of the loosening of the lockdown. It's hard to remember really what's been going on. And it's taken me a little while to get this out, as, the demands of life and living and children and work and all these other lovely things have meant it's all been a bit full, and I've actually needed to take a little bit of time out as well, because I was feeling a bit frazzled about you, but I was feeling slightly broken by the end of July after the last few months. But yes, more to come on the evolution of the podcast. There's some changes afoot. Going to play with the format a bit, and and a few changes coming as we get into the autumn. But I'm going to get on with this show. I'm going to cut straight to it now. This is episode 38 of the Spaceship Earth podcast with Georgina Wilson-Powell from Pebble magazine. Enjoy.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that?
Right then, Georgina, welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
Thanks for having me on board.
It's a pleasure. It's what is it? It's Friday. It is. We're early July, aren't we? I have to sort of say this because it will take a few weeks to get them out and just give everyone a bit of context. So thanks to him. We've been trying to do this for a while, haven't we? And it's
well, the lockdown I think happened. The pandemic happened.
Pandemics and all kinds of stuff. But so before we get going and dive in a bit, it'd be great to just know a little bit about where you're at right now. Can you give us a bit of context where you are, and maybe just, as I say, we're on the sort of the eve of what are they calling it? Super Saturday, isn't it? What's it called? I can't remember what it's called.
Saturday. Doesn't feel super. Well, physically I'm in Margate. Physically, emotionally, where am I? I don't know. Physically I'm in Margate. I moved to Margate about 18 months ago out of London, like a lot of other people. And actually it's been a saving grace. I live right next to the sea, which is fantastic. So even though we're in a tiny flat with a tiny balcony, we can actually go out and be outside and be in nature. And even though I've kind of not done it so much the last few weeks because work's picked up again, but I've all through the early days of the lockdown, at least I was walking every day. My allotted hour was spent on the beach, and it was just an absolute godsend. So that's been, I feel very connected to where I am right now. I've never been in a town for so long without having left it.
Yeah.
I've kind of forgotten what the outside of Margate looks like.
It's funny, isn't it?
I'm going to Ramsgate on Sunday, which is 2 towns along, and that feels like the biggest adventure.
Wow. And what's it been? How's Margate been? Like, what's been the vibe during lockdown?
Do you know what? Until recently, the vibe's been amazing. The businesses that have been open or have pivoted to like takeout or to like takeaways, it's been such a community, and I've been involved in lots of WhatsApp groups for like my local road and the block of flats that I live in. We've all been helping each other out, and it's been really, that side's been really wonderful. Recently, it started to change with like massive influx of people wanting to be on the beach and enjoy the hot weather, which you can't blame them if they're coming from a place where they've got no outside space and they need to escape. But it is changing the feel and the makeup, and the litter's just gone insane. So I've been doing some litter picks, and I think everyone's quite wary about what's going to happen this weekend.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely a bit of edge, isn't there, in the air? And who knows? Hopefully, it will. It will pass smoothly, but
I'm going to be hiding at home, I think, this weekend.
Yeah, I know. So listen, we want to get into the Pebble story. We also want to get into the fact because you've just actually sort of done a bit of a relaunch, right?
Huge relaunch,
yeah, exactly. So sorry, yeah, exactly, a big old relaunch, and we want to talk about that. And I think, but what I would love, and I know you've told the Pebble story sort of in various places, but just for my listeners, just to give a little bit of context on the journey in, and then just I guess that what is just maybe just framing up for people like the Pebble mission, and then we can start to explore, get under the hood of it all. But it'd be really interesting to see how you came, because I know your journey is pretty fascinating as well. So.
Oh, well, thank you. I think I'm just an everyday person, to be honest. I mean, I didn't grow up in a particularly sustainable household, or my parents weren't like permaculture farmers or anything like that. Pebble.
I always wanted to have parents who were permaculture farmers.
Yeah, I wanted a life, which I would have hated as a teenager anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been a magazine editor for like 16, 17 years, and I've worked with Lonely Planet and BBC Travel and BBC Good Food, and I spent a lot of my career out in the Middle East. I was in Dubai for 6 years and traveling the world, and had a very glamorous lifestyle. I was taking like 20 or 30 flights a year, which I now shudder at. But bit by bit, it really got to me. And I really had this sense of like what we now know as flight shame and carbon guilt and all these kind of phrases that we now sort of bandy about. But this was sort of 2013, 14. And when I moved back to London, I really couldn't find anything that spoke to me as a consumer and as a reader that brought together all these ideas of sort of reducing plastic and changing the way we live and embracing ideas like permaculture and but also the sort of the innovative side of things. So I'm a big Wired magazine reader, and I love all the crazy inventions, but that really only spoke to a kind of like frat boy tech audience. And I just thought there's a way to combine all these things that isn't being done. And I got more and more frustrated as a writer and as a journalist trying to pitch sustainable ideas into mainstream, newspapers and magazines, and just constantly being rebuffed and being told no one's interested, it doesn't sell, who cares?
Did you get what's the business case? That was the classic I used to remember a lot. Like, what's the business case of sustainability?
Or someone goes, yeah, we did our sustainable issue, our one issue a year last week, so we won't look at it till September. And you're all the time you're kind of going, but we need to talk about this now and every day, and we need to make changes. And I totally believe that media and storytelling can be a force for good. I totally believe that positive stories are how we influence people, how we force change, how we have social shifts. So I wanted to play a part in that and use my skills for good, if you like. So I launched Pebble at the end of 2016, and it's become a platform. We call it a stylish guide for sustainable living, but really it's more than that. It's become a community. It's become a family. We have a hugely engaged Facebook group. We have our newsletter, which people sort of find us through. We have our social channels. We started doing events last year so we can meet our readers and bring people together in real life. And it's really become a hub for anyone trying to make, we call the changes of everyday activism. So whether you just want to change your loo roll to something that doesn't have plastic, or whether you want to embark on a whole new career as an ethical entrepreneur, we're that kind of that hub, that place where we'll hold your hand and help you through.
Yeah, it's because you're certainly watching your Pebble mission and seeing how it's unfolding, and there's always so much energy, and you are experimenting a lot. And I remember, was it the Pebble guys? I remember coming across, was it the
Yeah,
guys you the
we
place-based
did some
guys?
amazing city guides a couple of years
That's
ago,
right.
and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
framework works brilliantly. And the idea was to bring together all the good stuff that's happening in secondary cities, so keep people out of capital cities,
yeah,
combat over tourism, but really connect them with like everything from the best bike paths through to like co-working spaces or vegan bakeries. And
yeah.
we couldn't. I'm very good at launching projects. I'm not so good at staffing them. Um,
Oh, it's big stuff. I remember. I mean, the reason I remember, I was actually doing some work with Google Creative Labs at the time on on kind of sustainable living and stuff. And your guides had just landed, and I brought them into a session as an example of. But because I can totally feel it as what you're saying. This whole idea of you can see where these things, the need for them, and you can understand how to shape them and bring them into the world. But then actually, you've got to try and develop them, and it's just
That's it.
it's a hardcore piece to do, isn't it?
I'm really good at the ideas, and I'm really good at seeing what the trends are coming in and kind of go, okay, well, if we do this and we put this together in this way, we can solve that problem, or we can connect people in a way that is meaningful. But like every small business, you've still got to you've got to make profit, you've got to make revenue, you've got to have the right people in the business to kind of help you drive that vision. And I think that's they're challenges that every small business faces.
Yeah. So what's at the heart? I guess I know we'll talk about the bit, the relaunch in a little bit, but just what were you finding out? I guess that feels like at the key of the Pebble mission. You've got these different things. Obviously, you've been innovating and trying those things, but tell us about what's at the real heart of it.
So this is something we actually recently realised and distilled when I was trying to come up with what it is we're really doing, because we do have a mission, and we're kind of that. We want social change at a huge level, but why we want it is because we want to move away from overconsumption. Now that can be in whatever form you can think of. So maybe it's stopping buying clothes from Primark and buying more secondhand or vintage. Maybe it's just the amount that you travel or literally consume carbon. We want to move people to a more carbon zero or carbon negative economy, and we're doing that through this kind of positive storytelling, but also making it stylish and desirable. People aren't going to stop shopping, they're not going to stop traveling, or I know we've stopped traveling so much at the moment, but people still have that thirst. So we see it as better to kind of divert people into apps and businesses and brands and products that actually give back to the planet or help the planet, rather than just mindlessly consume stuff that doesn't help us.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, isn't it? This whole, because obviously you're using the phrase overconsumption, and seeing how this kind of, this kind of journey of sort of consumerism to sort of, sustainable consumption, green consumption. Now this idea of overconsumption, and because it does feel like there is a sort of a bit of an elephant in the room with a lot of the way we live, right? Which is like at least how I see it is
Definitely
to be able to sort of there's always this sense that we'll just sort of greenify, we'll just green everything. Do you know what I mean? And we'll just keep doing what we're doing, but it'll all be green and lovely. And but the consumption piece is so tricky, right? Because it is, clearly as we understand more and more about the interconnections between consumption and climate and ecological collapse and all these gnarly interconnected things that are coming off this sort of core idea of being consumers. And then, as you say, so how do we what's your sense on where this is heading? And it's really interesting talking about overconsumption, because I think for me that was a shift. I remember when I spoke to you on this project we were looking at, wasn't it, during the lockdown, and you were talking about overconsumption as something you were really sensing your community was really engaging with. Yeah,
that's something in the last few months, I guess, I've realized that's actually everything that we're talking about. So one of our weaknesses, by being such a broad church, by covering so many different things from ethical fashion to travel to zero waste to whatever it's going to be, is it gets quite difficult to kind of go, this is what the mission is, this is what it's about. And actually, when you take a step back and go, oh, it is all about overconsumption because of we are all consumers. Everything that we do consumes stuff. You can't not consume anything. And that really feeds into my sort of experience and background as working in, consumer magazines. I see the impact they have. I see the negative impact they can have. And it's this idea of being quite realistic. We're not all going to wake up and all become vegan overnight, or we're not all going to never travel again. And about not beating people over the head with a stick and sort of going, sustainable is better, but there's no joy in it. We've got to give people the joy, the inspiration to make these changes and to have them stick. It's we often sort of say it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's like saying to people, going on a crash diet and giving everything up. And you do that in the way of overconsumption and not buy anything and not do anything, but it's never going to last. We want that sort of healthy lifestyle change. So, supporting whether it's supporting social enterprises or whether it's just buying less or whether it's mending and making. It's about inspiring people to feel the agency in themselves and empowering them to make that change rather than telling them they're wrong or it's all doom and gloom. Obviously, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, but I think this.
Yeah, there's plenty if you want to find. If you're struggling to find some, we can signpost you to lots.
You really have to go far. But for me, there's this huge misnomer about the individual can't make a difference, and I just think that is so dispiriting. We have to have hope, we have to have agency, we have to have power, and we have a lot of power as consumers, and we kind of forget that. So it's about putting that feeling of I can do this, I can make a change back into people's hands. And we have readers from 18 to 65, we have readers all over the world, but they all connect with that kind of accessible message of like, oh, I can do something, I can make a difference. And that's what we've sort of, that positive message has to run through everything.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing, you've been working on the relaunch, which has just happened, and you must have been obviously during the lockdown, you've been, I guess reflecting a lot on, what you're hearing and seeing and speaking to your community, etc. But one of the things that sort of feels like I've noticed and heard a lot during this lockdown is that many people who've been able to stay at home, but have sort of noticed that by slowing down, they've been able to live, a more sustainable lifestyle, right? They've had a taste of actually what it can be, whether it's been preparing food, rather than running around just, because they've had the time to do it, or whether it's been fixing stuff or creating things versus consuming things, or whether it's dabbling with a little bit of food growing, or do you know what I mean? And all these things, and which is brilliant. But then you go, isn't it a bit, so what's that all about? That the only way we can experience a sustainable lifestyle is if we slow down, and actually the world that we're in doesn't, unless there's a pandemic, doesn't really want us to slow down, or is designed for everything to be speeding up. So I was sort of a bit curious about that, because that feels like sort of like, that's interesting. Do you know what I mean?
I think this is a really good point, and it's something I think that's really frustrating for a lot of people, because we can see what's right, we can see what feels better, and just having that time to try making bread for the first time, or like I mended my partner's jacket, which is I've never done any mending before, and I really got a kick out of it, and that's something I wouldn't have been able to do if I was commuting backwards and forwards into London or rushing around for meetings, or I think having the headspace to think about these things, because for the last, let's say 50, 60 years, whatever, we've just been driven by convenience and price. They have been our two metrics that we value over everything. How convenient is it? How quick is it? How much more can I get in my day? And also how cheap it is. And really, I think the lockdown has given people a sort of maybe a new access or a temporary access, maybe, to kind of go, oh, well, convenience is out the window because I'm not going anywhere. And actually what's worth, price isn't, we muddle up price and cheap. And actually the best price could be, well, it's a bit more expensive, but I'm supporting that shop down the road because I want that shop to be there in a year's time, or I'm supporting my local bar by buying wine that's more expensive than it is in Aldi because I like my bar, and I know people there. And that's a completely different value set to us rushing around just kind of grabbing stuff in Tesco Metro because it's on the way to work, and really not thinking about how that food got there, or what you're going to do with the plastic, or where your money's going. So I think we do need to slow down. I think we have all been sold this kind of like more, more, more. You can have everything. You can do everything quicker, quicker, quicker. Now we've got apps for everything, just more. It goes again back into that overconsumption, because to me, doing less and slowing down is a really key part of it, of moving
Yeah.
away from that overconsumptive mindset.
And just listening to you talk, it reminds me again of this idea of sort of being more conscious of the relationships that we have through our behaviours. So, like you're saying, supporting your local bar versus a sort of a corporately owned chain of supermarkets. So you're sort of you're actually investing in that relationship, or understanding the relationship around who made this thing.
Definitely.
Beyond into the supply chain, which is again, it's a sort of shift of, it is a values thing, but it's a shift of different sort of way of starting to think about our, like you said, the whole idea of
Well, I think a lot
the
of the time
individual.
we've forgotten we even had these relationships.
Yeah,
We sort of talk about on site like beyond the bin. We never thought beyond the bin. You went into a shop, you bought the product, you put the product in the bin when you finished. There's this kind of blinker either end. You didn't think about where it came from or how it was made or what it was made of, and you never thought about what you put in the bin, where it went, or how it was disposed, or the fact it's probably still with us. And I think
yeah,
people are starting to question that a lot more, and especially in the lockdown, I think as well, people just being amongst all their stuff all the time at home, sort of seeing what piles up. Like I did an everyday plastic survey. A friend of mine runs this really amazing sort of 4-week course where you log and monitor all of the single-use plastic you use in a week. And even I was shocked at how much we use, and I think we're pretty good at it. And just
how's that? What's that? That sounds fascinating. What's that? How does that work? You just
so
is it
you
like
you pick a week, and you're in
yeah,
groups of, I think the first cohort was 70 of us, and we did it all on Zoom. And
yeah,
for the first week, you literally don't throw any single-use plastic away. So everything goes into a bin, even like the tiniest little speck.
you just collect it all.
Collect it all, and then the second week you work out like what it is, if it's soft plastic, hard plastic, if it's food, if it's toiletries, and then you kind of work out a sort of plan of like how you're going to reduce all these plastics. And it comes back with a lot of statistics about how little plastic is recycled, even if it says it's recyclable, and all these other things. And I think it was a really good experience in the lockdown, because you came face to face with the stuff that you normally throw away, and you had to sort it all out, and you're like, God, I've eaten a lot of chocolate bars in the last week.
Yeah.
Whereas we've all had this kind of like happy ignorance of, we don't think about the consequences of all the stuff that we consume, like whether that's physically consuming food or all the stuff that we just get through on a daily basis. So I think it was a really reflective thing to do, actually.
Yeah, I've often wondered, like, could you have some sort of emoticon thing that you could like tap when you look in the bin? Because every time I open my bin, I almost want to weep. It's like even like even though that we try in my household to always, but it's just I can't help it. I literally feel like I feel deeply sad every time I open the bin, because I look in it and I'm like, even though we're recycling whatever, I just go, what's going on? And it's like, because I can't help but look at those things and go, I know that those are potentially going to be around for
longer
hundreds
than
of
you
years.
are. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I think it's this, and we are now all carrying. I think, unfortunately, it almost goes into so far that we all now carry around such guilt about all of our purchases, and it can feel so overwhelming that we end up doing nothing. I was really not looking forward to the survey, but I'm really, really glad I did it, because it was like, oh, actually, we kind of score. We don't have any plastic in our bathroom and our toiletries. We've got rid of all that. That's brilliant. Where we're falling down is our like fruit and veg. So okay, we look at that. I think it's a really weird balance between like not overwhelming yourself at the scale of the problem, and actually having a bit of knowledge and sort of data for what you do yourself.
Yeah, totally. And do you come across sort of in this process like people like in a family or in a household who sort of feel like they're sort of all over it, but the other folks they live with aren't? And how does that...
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, there's only 2 people in my household, so like I can run a quite tight ship. But I think it's really difficult, especially if you're like perhaps friends sharing, or you've got young kids. It can feel like a hugely uphill battle, and I think you've got to, you need quite a lot of willpower just to keep going every day. But I think, something we talk about on the site is, it is a new day each day. You're not ever going to make all of the right decisions 100% of the time. That just isn't possible for anybody. So you do what you can, and you sort of, mitigate where you can. Maybe that's planting trees or carbon offsetting, or, what else could you do in another way? And I think it's going to be different for everybody. So, if you haven't driven your car for 3 months, you're probably net positive.
You've probably got a flat battery when you when you try and start it. It's what we did the other day.
Oh no.
Exactly. So I should have turned the car over. So the overconsumption. So what else is, before we dive into the new mission or the new overhaul and where it's all heading, but maybe that's part of this is anyway, but what else have you sensed? Are you sensing shifts during this lockdown? Like, people are kind of, what else is sort of coming up for people, as you can see? We talked a lot about the overconsumption piece. Are there other things that people are kind of,
I think something that I'm seeing a lot more is people are really taking notice of what brands are supporting the causes they care about and are being responsible.
Okay, tell me about that.
For example, like sort of in the fashion world, the number of large-scale fast fashion guys who've completely left their manufacturers in like Pakistan and Bangladesh high and dry by cancelling orders that have already been delivered, and leaving stock in warehouses that's just going to stay there forever and not paying bills. And I think there's a lot of people are watching what their brands are doing and what they're talking about and the causes they're supporting, or how silent they're being over causes. And I think people are taking note. So I think there's this idea that we expect more and more, we expect our corporations, we expect the brands we love to share those values that people are starting to embrace more, being this conscious consumer, thinking about the impact, whether that's on the workforce, whether that's on the environment. I'm kind of expecting us all to be a bit more responsible. I think there's quite a lot of, fear of how we've gotten ourselves here, and we all want to be working towards a better world.
Yeah, has anyone, I mean, I guess two ways. Anyone that you think that's been doing poorly at this, or anyone that's been doing really well at this? I mean, who will give us a sense of like.
I think unfortunately most of the ones that I've seen people get really cross about are the big fashion brands.
Yeah.
And this idea that, do we need 24 drops in 48 weeks with a t-shirt in 85 different colors? I think there's this idea of like, do we need to shop at the same rate that we have been? I think there's a lot of people who haven't missed all the big shops being open, and using that time instead to spend with family, or to bake or mend or cook or whatever. So I think it does feel quite unbalanced at the moment, when you can go and buy something in Primark but you can't send your kid to school, or
yes,
I feel like our priorities have got muddled up. And I think a lot of people have actually taken this time to take a step back and go, hang on a minute, like, what we value is nature, and we want to spend more time outside, and we want to teach our kids better. And sorry, it wasn't very good grammar. We want to teach our kids properly.
Yeah.
We don't want cheap clothes that are going to last for 3 weeks.
Yeah. It's like, and yeah, exactly. And it's sort of like on this bigger sort of macro level government stuff. It's like, bailing out airlines versus our sort of art and music sectors. Do you know what I mean? And,
oh God.
Yeah, but because it's all, I guess it's one of the things I've been really puzzled with. And again, maybe I'm just stupidly naive, but I sort of find it so weird that we're living in these times where, like you say, so many people are witnessing and experiencing and noticing, and also, everybody has a point of view, right, about what things they'd like to see change or whatever. And yet we sort of have this we live in this sort of system, this political system, where all the decisions get made, no one's involved in them. Right. It's like, it's just like a bunch of folks that we have no really idea who any of them are, and and they decide what to invest in, what not, where to put money, where not, what things to back, what not, what's important for people and what isn't. And you just think, this is madness.
It feels so disconnected. Like, I think so many people I was reading a feature the other day, and I think they said 3 out of 10 people want it to go back to how it was before. The other 7, they want a green recovery. They want, a more climate positive economy. We want change for that's a fairer, more equal society. I think we have this once in a generation chance to really change things at a systematic level. From a climate perspective, from a rights and issues perspective, equality. And it feels like the people in charge are just sticking their fingers in their ears and going, just get it back to how it was as quickly as possible. We're not stopping to what could we do? How could we make it better? It's literally like sticking a bit of sellotape over it and going, just fix it.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I was obviously watching the whole school stuff, obviously being a parent, and but also just I'm always quite uncomfortable with how the whole system works anyway. But there's something. It's sort of like a friend of mine said a couple of months ago, actually, just about a month or I don't know, a couple of months into lockdown, was saying basically like, if you really want to force an economic redesign, the thing that will do it is if everyone refuses to send their kids back to school, because that's the only thing that will stop. Like the thing that's stopping the economy from being cranked up again is the fact that the sort of schools full of children are basically they're almost, in many ways you could argue, they're the sort of the reason that allows everyone to go and get back to work, right?
It's this hidden lever that we never even thought was possible.
A
year ago, if you'd kind of gone, kids aren't going to school for the foreseeable and planes aren't going to fly, you would have gone, that's never, ever going to happen. I mean, the idea of losing one school day a year ago would have been an absolute panic about
school strikes, right? A bit, the place was uproar because children were striking one day a month.
And they were going to lose their education, and their whole future was going to crash and burn because they've been on a climate strike. They haven't been to school for 4 months, and it doesn't look like they're going back to school anytime soon. And suddenly that's okay. I think people are very confused, and I think we want to have a say. I think we want.
Well, that's it.
We want to have a say in our future. Suddenly, the future is for grabs.
That's exactly it, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It seems to me to be like madness that. Well, even if you think, so I was listening to a thing, some web thing last week, and Paul Hawken was on it, who's a bit of a, for me, has been someone has been an amazing inspiration over the years, and sort of thinking and writing. And he just was saying that, he was in California, and he was just saying, I feel that we as a human species are in deep trauma at the moment. So there's deep trauma that's being experienced around the world. And, if you have, and I think that's the thing, right? You have this kind of consensus story that we have in our media of this is how the country feels, right? Or this is what we want. But actually, as we know, ultimately, when you drill down into everyone's lives, people are experiencing things so differently, right? Everyone's got their own complexities and experiences, and, have had different challenges through this process that will be traumatic in many ways. Do you know what I mean? And
definitely.
And what do you do after a period of trauma? You would, if it was seen as you'd had some kind of incident or whatever, or some accident, whatever, and you were having kind of traumatic, post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, right? You would have some therapy. You would be encouraged to open up, to talk, to share what you've been experiencing, to try and unpack it all. Do you know what I mean? Before you rushed back to the way things were. And yet we're ignoring all of that. We're not even, there's no, at the center, at the power, there's not even a line which says we really understand how many people must be really struggling through this process. Do you know what I mean? Or you must be feeling really confused. It's just it didn't happen.
No, and I think that's what's so frustrating. So I actually had PTSD a few years ago, and it totally changed my life. It changed the whole direction of my life. And I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have moved in a new direction without therapy. And it does feel like we've gone through this kind of awful thing, but also it's not even being acknowledged. And I think there's this kind of oh, it's all fine, and you're all kind of making it up if you're making a fuss, and it's kind of, you feel a
Right.
bit abandoned.
Right.
Not that I'm massively like the government's going to sort everything out for us, but I
Sure.
think as well, like there's just all the whole way along, what's really struck me is the lack of empathy. And I'm someone that's, empathy is the thing that I value over a lot of things. And I think there's just been no sense of we're in it together, or this is hard for some people, or let's all be a bit kinder. I mean, we've sort of been kind to our neighbours, but then in the last couple of months, we've been very good at finger pointing and, dobbing people in if they've been outside for longer. Or, I think this, from a political, from a leadership point of view, there's been a shocking lack of care and empathy. This idea that it's almost like running the country like a company, just like get back to work.
Yeah, right. Because you can imagine actually if you intentionally created, invested in capturing people's learnings, right, and experiences. So for me, again, why you build. What are you building? Why not build some infrastructure that helps like people unpack the trauma, right? Like that, build some support systems for people. It's this sort of very one-dimensional view of what it is that's needed.
Well, it goes back into this, like, I know we've talked about this before, like this unregulated growth for growth's sake, but you don't even really know why you're doing it or what it's for. It's just at all costs. And it's like, we know there's going to be huge job holes in certain industries, but there's no, we could do something really clever. We could reskill entire industries. We could create incredible new green jobs and move people over and help them on that journey. And instead it's very much like, it's almost sort of your fault if you've been made redundant. There's just a lack of planning or vision.
Yeah, right. And I think the thing is actually, again, it's not about having the answers. It's actually just by creating the spaces for people to be able to talk about this stuff, to share what's been going on, to be given the opportunity to participate in decision making, right? Like, what do we care about? What do we want to keep? What do we want to let go of? And I think that's the thing. It's this sense that nothing else is possible apart from this way of doing things. And I think that's what I find so frustrating.
I think people have also got a little bit of like, it's like they've seen behind the curtain. We were suddenly in the situation where structures that we couldn't even have thought we could question have kind of crumbled. Flights are pretty much grounded, schools are shut. We're in a situation that no one could have ever imagined. And it's like, we've got an opportunity to question these things.
Right.
And really imagine what they could be and reset them. And instead, we're just like eyes down, don't look up, carry on. I've been doing a lot of sort of reading and getting really interested in citizens' assemblies recently. And I think that can be such a beautiful way of making people feel involved and coming up with really imaginative ways of fixing like local communities, because we're going to have to make those local community links stronger, if we're to withstand other pandemics or climate emergencies sort of related issues. And I think, how do we invest in those local communities? How do we know what communities want unless we talk to people?
It's I think this is the stuff I'm struggling with the most, because you see so much possibility in just having a different approach to how you come out of this, much more based on listening, much more based on participation, much more based on, bottom up. Do you know what I mean? Allow places to really kind of become involved in a kind of different form of decision making. And we know again, it's like, this stuff it's not nuts. We've been building these processes for years. It's like, it's all possible. It's not like it isn't pipe dreams, but it's almost like something in kind of central government either refuses to accept that there is another way, or again, is this just the power dynamics of how this stuff works?
It's very much like sticking their fingers in their ears and like humming a really bad tune until it goes away, But I think, sort of taking it back to, you asked me earlier, like what I'd seen change in the lockdown. Yes. So we have this big Facebook group, and it's got a lot bigger in the lockdown, and it's where Pebble readers come and share their tips and their advice and ask questions on how to find sustainable things, or just share what they've been doing. And the thing that's really, really struck me is how amazingly incredible they all are. Like,
Yeah.
way more than I'm doing, and like growing their own vegetables and making stuff and upcycling stuff and helping in the local communities and volunteering. And you just think there is such a wealth of goodwill and skills and, you know, people who want to help each other and people who want to form communities. And we've got this wealth of like all sort of, you know, survival skills and traditional skills that need to be shared and passed on. And that's all just there waiting to be tapped, and we're not using it. You know, I know, I think, wasn't it over 1 million people volunteered for the NHS like voluntary scheme? You know, people are desperate to get involved in something that's positive and gives back and gives them that sense of feeling useful.
Yeah.
And it's such an untapped resource.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see over the next couple of months. I think does this awakened population, does it really keep holding this, keep stepping into this space, or you know, because it's almost like you need sort of resistance, right? You need to be willing at an individual level to sort of resist some of this return, because it gets back to that, you know, what you chat about at the start about the individual agency, but it kind of needs, it's almost like, you know, because I think when people say enough, and you know, they I mean, look at the Marcus Rashford and the school lunches, right? Or
well, I think this idea of almost like civil disobedience, of refusing to go back to, you know, the corporate commute and everything else is really interesting, because I don't think I'm alone in feeling like the last few weeks have really stepped up. So I'm almost at back working capacity, but obviously we're still at home, we're still fragmented, you're still trying to juggle a million other things. And my partner works for a big bank and they've got a lot busier. My business partner is tearing his hair out with work, because we're in this really odd space. You know, we're still kind of like, we've been dumped on a different shore by the pandemic, but we're kind of still expected to work in our capacities. And I think there's quite a lot of not resistance, you know, we don't want to go back to this crazy, we didn't have time anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. And I think so last night there was this group from the ad sector, the Purposes Raptors. They've been working on this great reset, just sort of, you know, into the sort of ad world, but to you know, again, to very much say, look, you know, about having agency again, about saying, like, you know, you've experienced something different. We understand the negative impacts of our work more and more. We've seen that, and we also understand the influence that we can have with our work to bring on something better, more beautiful. But actually, it's going to come down to, like, you know, holding the line. You know, it's like, and I do think that's what's so interesting. Like, you know, what is coming now, because I think that's it, isn't it? Is you can feel the pull, you can feel it coming.
And I think, unfortunately, we've actually got a really small window to make to hold the line, to make a difference, because before long, especially once the kids do go back, I think, you know, it's almost like you're going to blink and wake up one day and you'll be back where you were in 2019.
Yeah, you're like, did that happen?
Yeah, and I think there's this real rush from the government and from you know, big structures to get us back there before we even have a chance to question any further, which all sounds a bit Matrix, to be honest, as I'm saying out loud. But
what doesn't these days?
I think we almost need to agree that we're not going to do anything more for a month or something. The whole country sets down and has a we take all of this just to kind of go, okay, what do we want? What are we going to do about it? Let's not make any knee-jerk reactions and just pause. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it is super fascinating, because I say, it's like you kind of sense, right, okay, so the central powers are, you know, are certainly not making any signals that anything significant is going to change. No significant learning has become new embodied knowledge from from our leaders. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, so what are people prepared to hold on to and let go of? And I'm really fascinated by that as well. I'm really fascinated how, and again, if you read around and look around and you sense, your sense is that there are people, you know, there are huge amounts of people around this country and around the world who are who are sort of feeling like they just so don't want to let go of some of these new learnings, and
No, and
this
like
opportunity.
it's not all been brilliant, and there's also a lot of stress and
Course.
strains and stuff working at home. But I think this glimpse that it doesn't have to be a certain way is really powerful.
And I think if and you just have to, and I guess the other thing is dialing it back up to the, the mega issues that are still coming faster. It's 38 degrees in the Arctic today, and it's like, we're behind everything in terms of the climate science, and pandemics may well become a regular thing. And it's like, it's not like we're sort of trying to sort of just step back into this, this world of perfection.
Isn't it? It feels very much like if someone's going to flick a switch and then it will be 9:00 on a Monday morning, sometime in the 90s, maybe.
Right.
We're full of positivity. We don't really understand climate change and the climate emergency, and it'll be like a bad dream. And I think this, unfortunately, we are all a bit over subscribed to all of the danger and pandemics and climate emergency and everything. And I think it's that fight for people's time and their attention and their input is a tough one, because I like you, I'm looking at the news, the sort of the environmental news, and just kind of going, this isn't even cutting through anymore, because people are so caught up with the pandemic, quite rightly. It's obviously something that we've never experienced before. But what chance have we got of getting the planet back on track when we're all so distracted?
So we got Pebble 2.0.
Let's move on.
Because obviously it feels like I know you're very much your work, and you're someone who does join the dots on. So to tell me about now and Pebble 2.0, and there's a couple of things we were talking before, weren't we, about even just some of the things about being a kind of being a media platform and being a brand, or all these things we're starting to sort of maybe notice more in this new context that we're living in. So tell us a bit behind the change and the direction and what's it all about.
I think after 3.5 years, we wanted to be more open about how we're joining the dots. So we sit at the heart of a network of about 3,000 ethical businesses that we help behind the scenes, and we connect people, and we introduce them at events, and we have our traders at events might meet new consumers, but they also might meet other traders. They do collaborations, and it's very organically, even though I sort of hate that phrase, become a community. It's become a family. We talk about Pebble as a family, all the people that work with us. We've all kind of grown together over the last 3 or 4 years. And I wanted that to be a lot more open. I wanted that to be a lot more obvious about what we're doing, because I totally believe in collaboration and, working together with all of these different social enterprises and brands and sort of entrepreneurs, and really make the case that actually this is a better way forward. That really expecting your brands or your service provider or your publisher or whatever, whatever you're using, to share those values with you. And these are the values that we sort of stand by. And we've put a whole new sort of area on the site for to show what we're doing as a sustainable business and the values that we believe in. But also kind of really being much more about how the values that we're taking aboard and what we're giving back as well. So we're now launched a sort of Pebble Forest. So we're working with Treedom to create a Pebble Forest in Kenya, planting fruit trees in an area where they have sort of more of an impact as a carbon sink, and giving farmers a revenue source. The idea is that for every 100 subscribers, we'll plant trees, and then every 100 subscriber, if you're that lucky 100th, you'll get gifted the tree. You can name it, you can look after it.
Nice.
See it all on the app, growing and everything. And we kicked that forest off with 50 trees this week. So we're kind of small to start, but that's
you're planting.
That's the most important thing. And I think
always be planting.
There's everything we do now. We're like, we can plant a tree from that. We can do, So we hope to sort of really make an impact. And I think as a digital business as well, it's really lovely to be able to see a physical impact from the stuff that we're doing. I love the fact we're a digital business. I love the fact that we don't make stuff because I don't need to add I'd be rubbish at making stuff, but we don't need to make any more things, and sort of content and communication is so much more important to me. But it feels nice to have I can point to a positive impact on the planet that we are having, and that's sort of part of the relaunch. Just this idea that we very much live our values, and we've talked about it a lot on podcasts and personally and on emails and our events, that we only work with brands that share our values. We support and help rise up those other brands that we work with. We we're all about connection, but really that hadn't come through on the website before. And I think, like any business, you grow over time and you add bits on as you're growing. And then it's only when you take a step back and you're like, oh, I've added bits on in this really weird way and it doesn't really make sense anymore. So we completely stripped out everything. The whole thing is actually a whole new website. We've ditched it and started again. We've spent a long time working through every single reader journey, how people interact on mobile, what they want to look at, how they navigate, what sort of time they spend on the site. So we've tried to make everything as accessible and easy to use as possible, and it just feels a lot more coherent, I think, as a whole. We've got stuff on there that obviously talks about our events and our communities, so if you interact with Pebble in a different way, you can understand what else we do, because we were kind of getting people coming to us and going, oh, I follow you on Instagram, but I didn't know you do events, or I follow your newsletter, but I didn't know you were actually a magazine. And I think it's, for me, it's been a challenge as a publisher, and I've always been a publisher and an editor, to now run a brand that is so much more than just a publishing site. This idea of sort of being a family and community and events, and it's much more of a wider platform. And I think that goes into sort of reacting about traditional media is changing, traditional advertising is changing, and for us being this kind of space where people can discover us through events or through social or through our content or through our newsletter and get the same experience, that's really important.
And tell me about, because I guess that's the thing, like you're working with you're working with new behaviors, and therefore you're working with kind of new startups and new enterprises that are trying to figure stuff out completely differently, designing businesses in a very different way. And you must be, you come across so many interesting businesses and projects, and I'm guessing some of them you've journeyed along the way as well, and I'm guessing some of them are growing through your community. And
definitely, we've had brands become friends. We've had brands where we've shared staff. We've, my business partner also runs a creative agency, so he's ended up designing brand identities and launching websites for new startups that have come to Pebble and started talking to us. So there's this real, again, it feels like a community and something that we're all working towards a bigger goal.
And what are the areas that you're like? What are the things that you've seen really, really develop over these last couple of years? What are the businesses and enterprises that
Sorry,
sort of really?
It's drilling.
What's that? Sound like you got someone locked up.
Oh, I live in a block of flats and there's drilling going on.
Right.
Do you know what's really weird? Actually, when you see a trend come through, suddenly you'll see 25 businesses all have the same idea, and I don't know how. I think it's this really. I'm always interested in how ideas spread and how people have the same idea at the kind of same time. But you definitely get these waves of new businesses. So last year or sort of 18 months ago, it was all around, removing the plastic bottles out of our toiletries and having solid shampoos and that zero waste sort of skincare. The last year has been very much around eco-cleaning and this idea of refilling and reusing and sending out sachets direct to home instead of buying your cleaning products in the supermarket. And then actually we're seeing a lot of, and this is surprising actually in the current market, but I'm seeing a lot of rental companies come through.
Right.
Working with perhaps kids' toys, where you get a bunch of kids' toys that you keep for 3 months and you send back, and they keep moving around so you're not buying new all the time. Renting buggies and sharing, kids' musical instruments and all this kind of stuff. So I think this circular economy.
That's super interesting, because I mean that whole
coming back through, even though there's a challenge right now, there's a challenge to hygiene
with the virus,
people want to share, but I think that's really interesting.
It is, because that's such a shift, isn't it? I mean, I remember my kids and when they were born, and just the amount of shit that you end up feeling that you're expected to invest in. You times that by God knows how many billion, and you're it's like that for everything, right? Isn't it?
It's incredible. And I think also, it was a status thing. If you had a posh buggy, or if you had a designer something or other, and people wanted to own stuff. And I think it's a slow moving trend, but one that is coming through, is this idea of not, your worth, your status not being attached to the things that you buy or the labels that you own. And that is a huge shift from 30
well, that's massive. Yeah.
designer handbags and the latest trainers. And obviously there's still a huge area where that still exists. But I think this kind of the sharing economy could be really, really exciting.
Yeah, and are you seeing like, I mean, obviously, who is the core sort of Pebble audience right now? And are you seeing shifts? Are you seeing new people coming in? And are there any kind of interesting signals that you're seeing out there about sort of, either age groups or people that you're sort of, exciting you that maybe are moving into this space?
Yeah, so I think on the website, on the magazine, it's between sort of 25 and 45. There are kind of key market and a mix of parents and not parents. But the events that we did, actually, we had a much younger audience. So I'd say 18 to about 35. And I think actually what's changed in the lockdown is we're getting younger people reading the magazine, coming through online, being in the groups, and also more men, which is really heartening, because actually the sustainable space is one that isn't terribly men heavy, which is quite weird. And I think that's, we're definitely getting more men subscribers to the newsletter and to the Facebook group. So that actually feels quite heartening.
Yeah. And what do you think's driving that?
I wonder whether it's just stopping and looking around, not rushing, and just taking time to think.
I think you're right. Actually, just as you're saying that, just reminded me of that. I did a couple of sort of focus group type things over the lockdown via Zoom on a project I was working on, and there was we did one session, sort of bunch of 20 young 20-somethings actually, and I just remember this. We were talking at the start, like what, it was all about. We were saying, what have you noticed during the lockdown, and this guy's just like, I've just realised just how much shit I spend, how much shit I buy, not during the lockdown. How much money I spend on total nonsense.
Yeah, that
I've now realised it's just total nonsense. Well, you know what I mean?
I was doing it's very exciting. I was doing my personal tax accounts last weekend. This is my life in the lockdown, and I was going through my bank statements for the last year. Oh my god, the amount of money I was spending in Pret, Tesco's, anything at a railway station, Boots. Even though I wasn't buying like water, or I was trying to take my own snacks and all that kind of stuff, but even like going into Pret with a refill, the reusable cup for coffee, and you just kind of go, oh my god, how much money do you just slips through your fingers without even when you're out and about.
Well, it's just sort of designed. It's all designed into just being everywhere. It's just everywhere you look. It's just like, I was like this, just sort of walking out the front door, it cost you about 10 quid just before you even sort of step through. It is insane, isn't it? Like how much this sort of disposable consumerist lifestyle, the infrastructure for it is everywhere.
And I think this goes back to this, what I've realised is a key thing. Like this convenience isn't convenient. It's not convenient for the planet. It's not really convenient for us. It's just, we kind of fed it as like, you need your coffee on the way to work in the morning, and you need your treat in the afternoon, and you need to go to Oliver Bonus and buy a treat for yourself. And, it's really weird. And I think that's, the lockdown has kind of broken that messaging a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's super interesting, isn't it? We were sort of like high on lots of caffeine and sugar, and running around the place and not really sure what we're doing, sort of. And these, sort of like, contact, just payment. We just almost have to sort of like just hold your hand up, and money gets extracted somehow from you, and it's just.
It's that rush of being busy and being busy for busy sake, feeling important, and our self-worth has almost now moved from stuff into like, well, I'm this busy, therefore I'm this important, and I'm
that's really interesting. That whole, I was reading something about this week about the the physical meeting thing, and how much of that has been driven by that sense of proving self-worth, being somewhere that you can. If you don't show up, you can't be taken seriously. You know what I mean? And all sort of like, and all these things, these kind of things, which we sort of unlearned a bit. And you're right, they're all, The
lockdown's given us a chance to actually like revel in the stuff that perhaps wasn't seen as quite so cool. The baking and the mending, and the actually just wanting to read a book, and this.
Yeah, I heard someone say that. It's actually, I heard someone exactly say that. So actually, I've realised actually it's quite cool being at home.
Yeah, and stuff I really, the teenage me is really enjoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So listen, you've just pulled your Facebook advertising, right?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
a
right?
good
So tell
step.
me, so tell me about that, because this is all very live at the moment, and just explain a little bit to any listeners who aren't aware of this campaign, and
So
and what's driving it for you.
I don't know who started it, but I know people like Ray and Patagonia and North Face were pretty
Yeah,
early on. So the idea is Stop Hate for Profit. It's a campaign to actually withdraw advertising from Facebook and Instagram for the month of July, but also to carry on further than that if you want to. Really
yeah,
retaliation for their lack of work progress change around hate speech, around Donald Trump, around you know white nationalism, around
yeah,
all the issues that so many people are on board with in the opposite way.
yeah,
And really kind of going, okay, well, if they're not going to change, then why are we spending money with them? And for me, I was really torn about this because I want, it's a brilliant thing. There's amazing brands that have stuck it, have already sort of said, pulled all their advertising. And as a tiny brand, you're kind of like, well, what's the difference if I do it? It's Facebook's actually where we get the most engagement on social media for our readers. It's a useful tool for us.
it's a big deal for you.
It's a
Yeah,
big deal. As a publisher, it's a really, I mean, I was going to say it's a love-hate relationship. It's not. It's really a hate-hate relationship.
yeah,
But you have the necessary evil, Facebook as a publisher. But we don't spend an awful lot of we don't spend a huge amount, and actually most of our traffic comes through Google and organic sources. So it's not going to damage us hugely. But
yeah,
it felt important to make a stand because I read a feature a couple of days ago saying Facebook aren't even that bothered by the big guys pulling their money because there are so many, like billions and billions of individual entrepreneurs and SMEs and startups that spend small amounts regularly, and that's actually their biggest income. So that kind of
yeah,
put it in perspective to me. I was like, okay, well, obviously it's not going to make any difference me individually doing this, but more people need to do it, and it doesn't fit with our ethos. We are a very, weirdly for a publisher, we have very, very strong ethics, and we live our lives how we talk about things on the site, and it doesn't work for us to then fund a platform that doesn't match those values. And I think this is something that I think hopefully is going to become more prevalent and a bigger piece of the conversation. We expect our brands to behave in a certain way, and we expect them to share our values, and we expect them to be, better for the planet. We need to do that on publishers. We need to do that on media platforms, on our social media platforms, but also our mainstream publishers. And we need to support that, whether that's Pebble, whether that's a podcast, whether that's a whole, social media platform. But yeah, we have this power to kind of pick and choose where our money goes. And my revenue is really, really hard earned. I don't actually want to give it to Facebook.
yeah.
So yeah, that was the push that I needed.
And I think it's so interesting because I think you're absolutely hitting it on the head, because this is the thing. It's like, it's in some ways it's there's these more tangible things that we can see in our lives. This is the plastic I refuse, the fashion label that's got a dodgy supply chain, so I'm not going to buy. Or there's these sort of more seemingly a bit more obvious shifts that we can make. But the whole media thing is fascinating. I saw a piece, I can't remember, was it George Monbiot did a piece recently? I think he's done this. He's talked about this quite a lot. But he talks a lot about actually who do it's not the fossil fuel industry that we need to be really trying to bring down here at the moment. It's the media industry.
And it's
something like
difficult to be a part of the media industry and have been a part of it for nearly 2 decades and agree with all of that. That's partly why I was so full of fire to set up Pebble, because I thought this is, most journalists are in the industry to help and to care and to talk about stories they care about and to promote, to help with topics. They're not in it to name and shame people and doorstep people and spread fake news. We need a reset in the media industry as much as anything else. We need to promote positive stories. We need to promote positive platforms. We need to promote platforms that are collaborative and community focused rather than only in it for their shareholders, as much as we expect that from brands.
And I think there's this stuff, this media work and this brand work, it is so key. And it also, I think people genuinely need help here as well, because I don't think people really understand how this stuff works. Most people, and so, this idea, I can't remember, I saw a great thing yesterday that sort of, it was sort of speaking to this, it was speaking to the Stop Hate for Profit thing on Facebook. And I can't remember what the example was, but it was something like, it's like, if you, it's like putting a billboard up, it's surrounded by kind of, white supremacists or something, you know what I mean? It's because you can't see it. Like your piece of advertising, your product, you might think you're doing great things, but the fact that it's being surfaced into environments all over the internet that are promoting some pretty dodgy shit, and I think that's the thing that I think, we're sort of, folks are, we don't really understand how it works.
No.
And therefore, do you know what I mean? And I think there's so much good intention still with kind of media, but it's the media.
And even media is a term that's totally changed. We were talking earlier about how things have got a lot more complex and different, and media doesn't mean anymore just the main 5 or 6 newspapers, or even,
right,
are there even 5 or 6 newspapers anymore? 4 or 5 newspapers and the BBC. It means so much more than that. It means all the YouTube bloggers, it means all the Instagram guys, it means anyone with a blog, all
with an audience.
The media landscape is so fragmented and diverse and weird and muddled up than it was when I started out. It's a completely different beast, and I think half the time the people in it don't understand it.
Yes.
So what are readers gonna do, or brands as well? Brands that want to sort of think they're reaching a lovely audience might not realize they're actually putting their marketing spend into a company that ultimately against everything they stand for.
No, it's and there's some great stuff like the Conscious Advertising Network, I think, who are really digging into all of this, and lots of brilliant stuff going on out there. But I think it's great you're doing it, and I think to talk about it as well, and because I think we're all, as I say, like, I think for me personally, I look at a lot of these challenges we face, but obviously the more we're able to learn our way into this stuff, the more we're able to understand, then it just helps people realize that actually they do, come back to where we started again. We do have individual power. We are able to shift things if we can start to figure stuff out, and we're able to sort of understand our impacts and what we support with the money we have, because that's ultimately what this is about, isn't it? It's like,
definitely. And I think that for me, as an editor years ago, I became very uncomfortable with the kind of stuff that the magazines I was working for were flogging, and the knowing the power that we had. And to me, that's what's driven my work with Pebble. It's understanding that the power of marketing, the power of branding, the power that consumers have and don't realize. And it's actually trying to funnel that into a different direction and give consumers more power and sort of guide brands a bit better as well. But I think that, to me, that is the missing bit of the puzzle. We talk about how we've got all these dry policies on one hand, and we've got these huge targets, and we want to get to net zero, and we want to achieve all the sustainable development goals and all this kind of stuff. And we need to take ordinary people on that journey with us, and we need to do it in a language they understand, in a format they understand, and not tell them what they can't do. So for me, magazines and media is a hugely important bit of this. It's the reaching people on on a platform in a way they get and don't feel too bothered by.
And so, connected to that, tell me a little bit about so I know one thing that you've been very intentionally sort of investing energy and time and stuff around is the zero waste culture and the zero waste networks that you've sort of you're working with in the UK. But I know there's a lot. Well, personally, I always feel that zero waste is, again, it's sort of folks that maybe have a sort of certain view of what it is, and maybe less view of what it could be. I'd love to could you just talk a little bit about where you think that's heading and what's interesting, exciting about it for you?
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I think the term zero waste is a bit of a misnomer. We use it when we don't really mean zero waste. We just mean low or less waste. So less plastic, more refills, being more conscious about what you buy, reusing, all of those things. Basically, that's what we're saying when we say zero waste. And I think it's just become a kind of handy phrase. But actually what the area that's really interesting for me is the kind of zero waste shops that have sprung up, all over the country. And when we started doing a list of them a few years ago, there was 13, and I think now there's 200 or 300. They've got a really interesting business model because they can't cannibalize each other's business, no matter how many of them really there are, because it's such a local thing. You're not going to walk more than half a mile with your glass jars to another zero waste shop. But also it helps investing in community. It helps investing in these local supply chains. It helps investing in local producers, which we're all going to need if we go through another pandemic or climate emergency. But I think it's also showing people a different way of consuming that is still fun, and it's still interactive, and it's still engaging and stuff. It's just taking out the packaging and taking out the kind of global supply chains that don't have a face, and again, you're just putting money into a global pot for shareholders. So zero waste allows you to meet the people behind the food that you're eating or growing or buying.
Yeah.
It's such a more positive way of being a consumer, without having to not be a consumer, if you like. So I think it is absolutely fascinating what's happened with it, and actually how many people are embracing it of all ages, and will go out of their way to go to a zero waste shop. And it's this idea of sort of that rejecting convenience again, because it's actually not good for us.
It's interesting, isn't it, about this? Because what I find fascinating is, like you're saying, that this whole idea that these stores can support a hyper local community because of the nature of what they're trying to do. And there's something also interesting around that connection, actually, like this, sort of, we're sort of seeking that connection to, again, I guess we're back to that story of relationship, right? It's sort of to be in relationship with a place or a shop or a store or a community of people. That sort of feels like that's really coming through now. And how do we, what might, what's your thoughts on how this whole space is going to evolve?
I think it's only more important. I think people have, another realization in the lockdown is that, again, these relationships can exist with local stores, and it's lovely. It feels really good to go and buy something from someone where you know their name and they know your dog's name, and they see you every week, or they know what you like. And again, it goes back to a slower pace of life and rejecting something that's just, easy and cheap and convenient. By doing so, you actually end up being a community, and you feel valued, and you feel part of something. And I think, when we are all locked, obviously the lockdown's kind of ended, but we aren't chasing all over the country like we were, or we're not flying all over the world like we were. So this is the time to invest in our local communities, and this is a brilliant way to do it. It feels very inclusive. Sometimes you might not want to go and join a community group, or you might feel too scared to go and get involved in a council meeting or something. But like a zero waste shop, it's such an equalizer. We all know how to shop. We all need stuff. It's a really good sort of icebreaker of meeting people and getting to know who else is in your community and what you can help with.
Yeah, I love it. It's more of that in amongst the madness. So thinking ahead, so what's obviously, we're in we're in the age of uncertainty, but what's planning, what's cooking for Pebble now with the new launch, and what can you share about the coming months?
Going on holiday, but I'm not, obviously.
You can pop out to the beach.
I was trying to toy with a 4-day week as well over the summer, and I don't think that's going to happen either. For us, it's about really cementing this relaunch in, about talking to people much more broadly and engaging people on our sort of positive media messaging on our. For me, it's actually this summer's about sticking my head over the parapet and actually being a lot more vocal about what we believe and what we're working towards and what we're doing. When I set up Pebble, it was very much I wanted the focus not to be on me. I wanted it to be on the magazine. I wanted it to be on the platform, because I didn't want it to be about my journey. I felt very strongly it wasn't a blog. It wasn't things that I'm doing. It was about sharing other people's stories. And I think after 3.5, 4 years, actually, we've now got enough of our own story to really share that. So it was kind of flipping it on its head, really, and becoming a lot more vocal about the stuff that we believe in and that we're starting to do, and also sort of Pebble itself, shouting a lot more about cohesively what we're doing. And then we have actually again, these things tend to happen at Pebble. We have a conversation and suddenly we're doing it. We had a Pebble Fest event booked in for the beginning of November for when COP26 was going to be on.
Yeah.
We decided a few weeks ago to change that into a virtual weekend event. So probably the 7th, 8th of November, full of workshops, mend-alongs, cook-alongs, talks, and then a virtual market, which is the kind of 3 pillars of all of our events, a sort of market, workshops and talks, but really based around this idea of it being the future. So being, instead of just having another panel of what are we going to do about fast fashion, you all talk about for 45 minutes and hand wring and go away, not really any more inspired. Actually, look
more depressed.
Yeah, more depressed. I've sat on the same panel for I've had the same conversation for 25 times in the last few years, and it just doesn't ever change. So I didn't want to just put another event on that went over and over the same problems. So the whole theme and focus of it is Future Fest. It's what does our society actually look like if we achieve carbon neutrality? What do we look like as a zero carbon society? What inventions have got us there? What does our daily work look like? What does our routine look like? What are we doing? What brands are with us?
Love it.
In my head, I want it to explore what the Jetsons, look like in the 60s when they were talking about the future, because I think there's, again, with positive storytelling, and the other missing bit is imagination. We need to imagine what it's going to look like if we achieve the goals that we need to achieve, because otherwise how on earth are we going to make that happen if we don't? We know what we're not for, but often we don't know what it is. What does it look like the world we're fighting for? So that's really,
and the beauty, I guess that sounds really exciting. I guess the beauty is is that we know that so much of it is alive and happening. The ideas are all out there, right? It's just most of us can't see them or experience them, or
exactly.
But actually
bringing those brands together, those ideas together of people who are often working at the fringes or working with small sort of consumer sets, or you can. It's one of the privileges of my job is I can see a lot of this stuff bubbling up, and you're kind of willing it on. So we really want to sort of pull those ideas together and have something positive and exciting to look forward to. Because I don't know about you,
love it. We'll be there. I'll be there.
I have 0 in my diary until Christmas, so we might as well do it.
Exactly. Well, that's exciting. Well, I guess the best way to folks is to subscribe to the newsletter, right? And that's the best way for people to get in touch with what you're doing.
So the newsletter is all of our new content every Friday. It's packed with positive news, but it's also where we flag up things that are happening first. So that's really the main one. Or come to the website or follow us on any of the social channels. I mean, we're on all of the social channels, so you'll find us as Pebble Magazine. But the newsletter is where you kind of get most engagement and stay most involved.
Amazing. So listen, we could yatter on for hours, but exactly. But first of all, thank you for taking the time for this. It's been super interesting, and I love where you're going with Pebble. And when I hear you saying things like you can kind of see, like, you're excited by what you say, and I can so connect with that, because that's sort of, I think, the thing that keeps me sane in amongst this insanity is that you can see what's possible, what's happening, what's out there, and you're like, whoa, this is just, this can just be, it can be so beyond what we imagine is possible, but we can't imagine it because we can't see it. You know what I mean? And I think we're so used as a culture being sort of banged over their head and told to get into line, and that this is as good as it gets, and stop moaning. That folks, I think, believe we've sort of reached the pinnacle of human possibility,
which is sad, right?
Yeah,
I don't want it to be the pinnacle, and I'm not very good at accepting what I'm told and authority and all.
No.
So I want to challenge that, and I want it to be beautiful and desirable and inspiring, and not scare people about the future. Just give them enough hints to be like, oh my God, we can support different businesses. We can use our money to do other things. And that
I think
a huge way that does, the biggest, I think, misnomer is the fact that you don't matter, and you do.
Yeah. Amazing. So listen, Georgina, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for this. And then I always, get to the end of this conversation, and obviously, the Spaceship Earth podcast is inspired by many fantastic thinkers and writers who've been sort of, exploring the concept of our planet as a spaceship. And I'm always I guess, interested in this idea of shifting to this kind of crew mentality, that we're sort of moving away from sort of being passengers on this spaceship to getting stuck in with the non-human world who are flying the thing most of the time. And so I just, this idea of becoming crew, I just wondered what that means to you at the moment.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think the thing that comes through the most clearly for me is it's about being a team. It's about all working together for a bigger goal. If you're crew, you're part of you're one cog in a much bigger thing, but you're all working together for the same outcome. So for me, it's that sense of being part of a team, and being on the same team, I think is
nice.
Important.
Yeah, I love that, and that certainly feels like It's definitely a way forward, isn't it? It's like stepping into something bigger than ourselves right now.
There's plenty of people with you. There's plenty of people who want that same step forward. But thank you for listening to me ramble. I hope it made sense.
No, it's lovely. I love ramblers. That's what this podcast is all about. It's just about interesting people doing interesting things, inspiring things, and having a good old conversation about it all. So thank you so much. And,
very well. Thank you for the opportunity.
I hope Super Saturday sort of comes and is it called Super? I don't know what it's called, but whatever it is, I hope you survive and it'll
be fine. I've got gin. I'm going to stay home.
Yeah, I've got gin. I've got barricades. I've got extra locks. We'll be fine.
It's fine.
Exactly. I've got an internet connection. But listen to it. Lovely to speak, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. Thank you so much, Dan.
All right. Take care.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Georgina Wilson-Powell from Pebble magazine. They are doing amazing work, covering like such a big range of issues, topics, ideas, new businesses, networks, communities, new sort of shifts in behavior, like super deep. So worth subscribing to their newsletter, check out what they're up to, and support. So anyway, that's the end of this episode. If you enjoyed that, please do share with others. Give us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever you listen to on. It will take you 60 seconds and it will mean a lot, and it will help others find it, and that just helps the show. So if you want to drop me a line, it's dan@thespaceship.earth, or you can follow us on Instagram @thespaceship.earth. A few changes and adaptations coming to the Spaceship Earth podcast. I'm just moving into a bit of a reflection period and thinking about the next phase of the podcast journey. It's been epic, but I'm trying to get a little bit of help, a little bit of a crew. I took a bit of time off over August, really, just because I was knackered, and now starting to pick back up and figure out what the next evolution looks like. But stay tuned, lots of exciting things coming down the line. Okay, I'm going to leave you with a track to play this one out tonight. Tonight? Maybe it's today. Maybe it's the morning. Maybe it's the afternoon. I have no idea when you're listening to this. But right now, for me, it's tonight because I'm sitting in my studio and it's getting dark outside. So tonight, I'm going to leave you with this track. It's a track by Dee Montero featuring Meliha. I think I said that right. It's called In the Wild. This was released a while back, possibly last year, maybe even the year before on Anjuna Deep's, a lovely label. And I find in times like this, in times of massive uncertainty, sort of never-ending kind of global car crashes occurring every time you sort of pop your head above the parapet to have a look at the news, I find that I find great comfort in music and dancing, and music and dancing, and particularly sort of deep, sort of cosmic, sort of house music that gets me particularly excited. And I sort of feel like this new world, the more beautiful world, would involve a lot more dancing. I think there would be probably speakers around a lot more in the streets. We'd be encouraged to kind of dance more often. I think that would be good. I think that's what we need to be doing more. We need to be dancing. dancing a lot more, letting all this stuff out of our heads, letting it go, connecting with this kind of extraordinary life that we have, that's happening right now through the medium of dance. More dance is definitely needed. So on that note, I'm going to leave you with that. Take good care, folks. Thanks for listening. Means a lot. Look after yourselves. And until next time, peace and out.